We had multiple reports come out today. We're going to talk about, we had both USDA release the quarterly grain stocks and their acreage report. We also had Stats Canada put out their acreage estimates this morning. So we had a lot of numbers to go through. I think we'll start with the grain stocks. What do you have to say about that one, Randy?
Well, it was good to see that, the numbers came in pretty close to expectations. The wheat numbers came in, a little less than anticipated for stocks, tells us our demand was a little bit better. Likely we'll see a small adjustment maybe to exports or something along those lines, maybe feed demand, as USDA has been cutting that feed demand for wheat here quite regularly. A little bit higher than last year because we did have a little bit better crop than we anticipated. For corn, stocks came in quite a bit less than anticipated, 113 million bushels below expectations. That tells us the demand has been a little bit better, or the crop wasn't as big as last year. So USDA is either going to have to come in and adjust the crop size, which that we won't see until likely September when they come in and make adjustments to the previous year's production. But they're going to have to come in and increase exports because we're all, with 10 weeks left of the marketing year, we're already above USDA's projections. So we're likely going to see exports increased in the next supply and demand estimates. It was, again, still a little bit bigger than last year, but the corn number did turn out to be a little bit friendly. And soybeans pretty close to expectations. They came in as we thought, not looking for much of a change in those numbers at all.
And we've just got some charts through there.
One thing looking at, where the stocks breakdown gets to be, for wheat right now, if you go back one, it's really interesting that 81% of the wheat stocks are being held in or held off farm. That means it's in commercial hands or it's in, the end user's hands. That's surprising with as much as the wheat market's been getting beat up, that the commercials are holding the stocks as far as wheat is concerned. For corn, the stocks continue to be pretty close to being 50-50 with what's being held on farm and off farm. So that's pretty much as expected. We'd expect to start to see some of those bushels start to come into town, though, as we're getting close to the next year's crop. A lot of guys wanting to empty their bins. And then when you look at it for soybean stocks, it's most of them are being held off farm as well, as a lot of those are being held by crush plants in the bins there. So that's also not surprising to the market, but it does show that there is still 30%, 35% of the crop sitting on farms at this point for soybeans.
Moving on to the acreage report. Just the one note, of course, USDA usually says that because they do this survey early, they believe there's about just shy of 2 million acres of corn left to be planted and about 8 million acres of soybeans left to be planted. Looking at the acres, there's a lot of numbers on here. Wheat, I guess, to the trade, wheat was the big surprise in this one.
It was. I mean, this was really, this was USDA's third look at winter wheat acres, and they still haven't gotten them wrong. We come with the January report, then we come with the March report, and then this one. Looking at it in the big picture, wheat was bullish. I mean, seeing winter wheat acres a million less than anticipated, almost 2.6 million acres less than last year. So that was friendly. The winter wheat acres making up a bulk of that, close to 900,000 of them. Spring wheat acres coming in about 100,000 less than anticipated, and even durum acres being cut quite a bit. So all the way around, this was friendly to the wheat side of things, just because the acres just aren't going to be there. For corn and soybeans, it turned out to be somewhat neutral. I mean, pretty close to expectations. I mean, the soybean number was almost exactly right on with what the trade was anticipating. Corn was a little bit above, but in the big picture, it wasn't that much of a change from what was expected from the market.
And then at the very bottom, we have principal crop acres, which is most of the crops together, and dropped another 2 million from last year on that.
It'd be nice to know where those acres are going, because we continue to see the principal crop acres decreasing. but we really haven't seen a place where they've been going. So it'd be interesting to keep track of just where the makeup of and what crops are losing it. But yeah, again, another big drop as far as principal crop acres.
Looking crop by crop here, corn, most states saw a decrease. We saw acres drop quite a bit from last year. And then when you look state by state, most states saw fewer corn acres.
And this is, compared to the previous year. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we saw, and we had more corn acres last year, so it was just normal to see the rotation go to a different crop this year. But you can see some of the dark red states saw some pretty deep cuts. And the states that did see the increase aren't big increases, are really the fringe areas like, Montana, Florida, even Kansas isn't a big raiser of wheat. And then also Arkansas. So the big states that make a difference, did decrease their corn acres.
Moving on then to soybeans. Soybeans were the flip side. Most states did see an increase in acres. And again, bounced back from last year. And lots of blue here. Minnesota was one of the few outliers there where acres are a little bit lower.
And that's surprising, with Minnesota, basically being, a third of the state or two-thirds or half of the state being corn and bean country. It's interesting to see that soybeans took a little bit of a decrease, and corn acres were also lower. So they're looking at something else that they're going to raise in that state.
Well, then when you put corn and soybean acreage together, North Dakota, we're seeing more corn and soybeans together when you combine them than last year.
Makes sense, as everybody's trying to leave some of the other traditional crops that we have up here, like wheat and durum and barley and some of the small grains.
Moving on to winter wheat, like you said, we've seen some winter wheat estimates before. Another drop in acres. Lots of red there. Pretty much everyone lowered winter wheat acres.
Which, when you look at how bad the prices were for winter wheat last fall, when the guys started planting them and the guys just had come off of a crop that saw some severe some discounts up here in the north, not a surprise to see the lower acres.
Moving on to spring wheat. Again, a lot of drops here. North Dakota down by 11.8% from last year. Do you think that number is accurate? Do you think it was too high, too low?
I think it's actually a little probably high. I think we could see, continue to see that spring wheat acres for North Dakota decrease. It just doesn't seem like we have that many acres here, especially as you go west. And there's going to be probably a little bit, because of some of the weather, especially in the north central part of North Dakota. There's probably some acres that got lost because of drought out there too.
And we're on a decline with spring wheat acres since 2018. We've dropped just about every year there.
Boy, and that's a big drop. When you look at it for those, 8-year time frame, we've lost close to 4 million acres of spring wheat. And a lot of that is, of course, goes to the corn and the soybeans. But it does show a little bit of a changing tradition as far as the north is concerned.
And like we said before, Montana increased. Everyone else, major spring wheat states saw decreases. On the durum side, same issue. North Dakota dropped 20% from last year in durum acres. And again, we had a little bump the last couple of years, and now we're dropping again.
And a lot of the increase the last couple of years, I think, was attributed to durum's premium over spring wheat and for crop insurance purposes. And we did see a little bit of an increase in acres. But last year's quality issues in durum, just like it was in spring wheat, caused a lot of producers to kind of put raising durum on the back shelf now.
And again, by state, pretty decreases in North Dakota and Montana. Looking at the minor crops, anything stick out to you here?
Well, two right away. One, you look at canola. It's a huge increase, record acres, I believe, for the U.S., up almost 600,000. So we're seeing a little bit more of a migration towards the canola. Surprising barley acres are up. We've been seeing a drop in the barley demand because of a lot of people go swinging away from, beer consumption to other alcohol products. So that was a little bit of an interesting move. Edible beans really wasn't a big surprise, especially since we're very dependent on the export market or the giveaway market for PL 480 or for dry beans. And with those programs kind of under scrutiny, not a surprise to see acres drop there.
On the sunflower side too is a little strange. The oil sunflowers increased by 3%, but the non-oils, that's a 25% increase over last year.
That's a big increase for non-oils. I mean, I know there were some good contracts that were being offered out there, but confections are a little bit tougher to raise. So that maybe the human consumption side of that confection sunflowers has really started to kick in and helping. But it is, we're getting sunflowers now back to the acres that they were at a few years back.
Any particular reason the dry peas are declining like that, both on the lentils and the chickpeas also?
Again, it's kind of like the dry beans. We're very dependent on export markets for those three crops, for the peas and lentils. And without them, it's pretty easy to oversaturate the market. So I think we saw a decrease in acres just because the demand isn't there for the product.
Moving on, looking at principal crop acres, we said earlier they are down 2 million from last year. And then when we look at planted acres by crop, of course, corn and soybeans far outweigh everything else. But looking at a percentage increase, canola was a big winner, up 27% from last year. And durum, peanuts, rice, the big losers in percent of acres.
That kind of speaks volumes, when you see canola and millet and rye as the big increases percentage-wise, kind of tells you that everybody's looking for something else to grow, especially when you start looking at millet, which hasn't been a market that's been around for quite a few years.
And then if we do that same change just by acres, of course, soybeans, the big winner, corn, the big loser in that. But then again, canola being the second highest with theirs.
And quite a bit less than soybeans, but still number two. So, I mean, it shows that we're leaning a little more towards those oil seeds because of the biofuels industry.
And then, like I said, the last slide we have is Stats Canada put their acreage estimates out this morning. U.S. has record canola acres, and so does Canada if they hit this 23.4.
Which is interesting, so we're both increasing canola acres. And again, a lot of that speaks volumes for the biofuels industry. And then we're both decreasing wheat acres tremendously, a lot more than anticipated. So it does show that we're looking at products that we're going to be able to maybe, control a little bit more at home than what having to depend on exports.
Anything else you want to add? What are we looking at now that we've got these reports out of the way?
Weather now gets to become the big driver now. As we go into July, we start looking at pollinating for corn as we're starting to see silk numbers start to get reported. We're seeing, the flowering and the pod setting as far as soybeans are concerned. So right now, weather is going to take the lead. I would expect the rest of this week, since the markets are going to be closed on Friday, that we'll see a quieter, a little bit more stable performance the next couple of days. Then next week, we're going to be focusing weather.
That's what we have on this one. If you have any questions, of course, you know how to get a hold of us. Give us a call. Thank you for watching.